We are seeing massive waves of better changes. We have the utmost belief in a future where society can be safe, fair, tolerant, and continuously fend for better well-being. But public governance must first be strengthened so that it can serve the people better. As an entity in public affairs, we do everything to contribute to that through every means possible.
We educate generations of agents of change. We nurture the world of academia through education, research, and community services. We support lifetime learning for professionals through immersive programs, and we collaborate with public sector organizations to solve the real problems in society.
Young people now hold immense power to lead movements that change nations. To support them, we design our programs to make them competent in understanding public policies and managing public affairs. We also ensure that each of our students has sensitivity towards local values and contexts.
For the undergraduate level, we have a regular program delivered in Bahasa Indonesia and an international program taught entirely in English, which also provide international exposure to each student, as well as our vision to prepare and equip our students with the best skills to become the change leaders in Indonesia.
But that's not the boundary we set for education. At the graduate level, our programs are even more varied to suit different needs. Our regular postgraduate program is specifically designed for those who want to pursue a career in academia. Strongly integrating research, we train our students to be expert analysts in public policies and affairs who ensure public interest to be always on the line.
Through our 45 credits curriculum, you will learn through lectures, workshops, and a program of ours called Studio. The key to our program is versatility. At the same time, the skill we will nurture in our students will be highly transferable outside academia as well, one that we believe to be extremely important in recent ages.
And along those taking up a professional career, there are our students in the PhD program who are prepared to be active contributors to the academic world through their research. As we provide all the support for students of PhD program, We encourage them to always look for the novelty of things and create innovations that are beneficial for the public interest.
We're doing all these not only to enrich our academic world, but to provide a strong basis of analysis for our working professionals when they deal with real-world challenges. That's not all. We also have another education for distinctive needs, especially during this challenging time after a storm of pandemic, where we have to be adaptive to continue our vision. Have a look at how it is done in our School of Public Administrations. While our earlier programs are concentrated on academia, we also strive to be the best in equipping those mid-careers to be upskilled practically.
With a flexible educational path and structure than an ordinary doctorate program, we focus more on the freedom of each student to shape the education that fits their passion.
With our constant efforts to return back to
Good afternoon. Once again, a very warm greeting to each and every one of you. I would like to welcome you all to today's policy dialogue, enforcing environmental policy for sustainable economic development, leadership and policy innovation, by the Department of Public Policy and Management, Faculty of Political Science, Gadjah Mada University. Before we start today's policy dialogue, on behalf of the working committees, I would like to thank every one of you that have been joining us on Zoom and on the DMKP YouTube channel. I would also like to extend our gratitude to our amazing speakers that have joined us today. Feel free to ask your questions to our today's speakers by typing your questions in the Zoom chat room. Kindly write your questions along with your name, your institution, and to whom are the questions for. For your information, we will only entertain questions that are written in the Zoom chat room, and there will be no questions from raised hands. Selamat siang, Bapak, Ibu, dan teman-teman sekalian. Saya Dimas Dianando, pembawa acara pada Policy Dialog pada siang hari ini. Mengucapkan terima kasih karena Bapak, Ibu, dan teman-teman telah bergabung dalam webinar pada hari ini. Apabila ingin mengajukan pertanyaan, sila menuliskan pada kolom chat Zoom dengan serta menuliskan nama, asal instansi, dan kepada siapa pertanyaan ditujukan. Untuk informasi, kami hanya akan menjawab pertanyaan yang dituliskan melalui chat room pada Zoom. Perlu diperhatikan juga bahwa webinar ini akan sepenuhnya menggunakan bahasa Inggris. For every single year, our institution encourages multi-perspective talks by emphasizing on capturing the public matter in addressing perpetual issues. Today, we bring all of you into one global forum to talk about the importance of adopting environmental policy in the policy agenda at the national and regional levels. In addition, this forum also provides a clear explanation of the challenges to adopt the environmental policy in developed and emerging economy countries. To gain a better comprehensive understanding of how a country executes its environmental policy, this discussion covers two subtopics, which are leadership and governance for sustainability and policy transformation for economic growth. As a platform of discussion from various experts with multi-perspectives, we hope that this webinar will contribute to raise the public discourse to win over the climate crisis, the greatest threat the world has ever faced. Dear participants, I will inform you of the upcoming discussion rules. Please pay attention to the following instructions. 1. The entire series of events in this webinar will be delivered in English. 2. Participants are expected to turn on their cameras, but must mute their microphone throughout the webinar. I will repeat. Participants are expected to turn on their cameras, but must mute their microphones throughout the webinar. 3. After all the speakers have delivered their presentation, a Q&A session will be open for 20 to 30 minutes. Feel free to ask your questions to the speakers by typing your questions into the Zoom chat room. Kindly write your question, your name, your institution, and whom the questions are for. 5. E-certificates will be distributed to the participants only if they have filled the attendance and evaluation form at the end of the webinar. 6. Participants are prohibited from saying, showing, and sending comments that contain harsh words, things that contain pornographic elements, and anything pertaining ethnicity, religion, race, and intergroup relations during the event. 7. Participants are prohibited from provoking other participants to disobey the aforementioned rules. Now, before we start today's event, I would like to invite you to take a picture together. All participants, kindly turn on your camera for the photos. I would also invite the technical team to get ready to take the photo. Once again, I would like to remind you to turn on your camera to take a picture together. To all participants, once again, I kindly encourage you to turn on your camera for the photos. Okay, we will start with the taking pictures. I will be counting to 3, and the technical team, please kindly assist us in taking the picture. Okay, shall we start from the first slide? I will be counting 1, 2, 3. Okay, we are now moving to the second slides. 1, 2, 3. And we are moving now to the last slide. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. The next agenda is the most awaited, which is the presentation from the 3 amazing speakers, Mr. Norbert Mas, the Indonesia Deputy Country Representative of Global Green Growth Institute, Ms. Livita Sumali, the Research and Development Coordinator for Archipelagic and Island States Forum, and Ms. Eva Bahtiar, the founder of Garda Pangan. The upcoming presentation and discussion will be moderated by one of the researchers in the Department of Public Policy and Management. Our moderator has had distinguished research interests in the field of political economy, digitalization, as well as gender and environmental policy. Without further ado, please welcome Ms. Audrey Fati.
All right, thank you, Dimas, for welcoming us today. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Ori, and I will be moderating this session. This is the fourth policy dialogue held by the Department of Public Policy and Management, bringing the topic of enforcing environmental policy for sustainable development, leadership, and policy innovation. We are having 3 honorable speakers today. Mr. Norbert Mas from the Global Green Growth Institute, Ms. Livita Sumali from UNDP, and Ms. Eva Bakhtiar, founder of Garda Pangan. So before we start, I would like to say hello first to our speaker one by one and introduce our speakers today to our audience. The first speakers of today's session is Mr. Norbert Mas. Hi Norbert, how are you?
Excellent, thank you. And thank you very much for having me at this fantastic dialogue opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us today. So Norbert enjoys leading multidisciplinary teams in search for high-impact solution to green growth challenges together with government partners and investors. Norbert emphasized the creation of buy-in and a strong sense of ownership among stakeholders as the basis of successful cooperation, climate finance mobilization, and also project implementation. Since 2019, Norbert is the deputy country representative of the Global Green Growth Institute in Indonesia. He is also working closely with Bappenas to coordinate with the Green Growth Program, a collaborative program between Triple GI and the government of Indonesia. In Indonesia, he is the leading project on the renewable energy, e-mobility, and climate finance with the Green Climate Fund. Thank you for joining us today, Norbert. And move to the second speakers. We are having Miss Livita Sumali. Hello, Miss Livita. How are you today?
Good afternoon. I'm all right. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. So, Miss Livita Sumali is a research and development coordinator of Archive Villages and Island State Forum, UNDP. She has joined UNDP since 2015 as an intern in Human Resources Unit, then continued her career as an environmental specialist by joining RED Project in the UNDP. And also her international exposure did not stop there. From 2016 until 2018, she worked as energy and infrastructure officer at the British Embassy Jakarta and project manager at the British Embassy The Hague, the Netherlands. Thank you very much for joining us today, Ms. Livita.
Thank you very much. Look forward to have the discussion with you all.
All right, and last but not least, let's welcoming Miss Eva Bakhtiar. Hi, Miss Eva, how are you?
Hi, Bu Audrey.
Thank you for having us today.
Thank you.
So, Miss Bakhtiar is interested in various topics such as engineering, education, and research. Based on her interest, she built two NGOs, namely Starsight Edukasi in 2016 and Garda Pangan in 2017. From 2008 until 2011, Ms. Bakhtiar had an opportunity to work in Freeport, Indonesia as a mine and mill project control scheduling engineer. And after that, she had a different role as a chief of underground mine scheduling engineer. And in 2016 until 2018, she decided to take role as a business consultant in iPrisma, working on agriculture development. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Can't wait.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without long overdue, let's start our session today. If you have any questions for the presenters, please use the chat features in the Zoom webinar. Okay, I would like to invite Mr. Norbert as the first speakers today, who will talk about environmental policy program and the collaboration with the government of Indonesia. Mr. Norbert, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Maori, and I'm again very much looking forward to the event today. Oh, I see we have a very young participant there. So it's great that this is an open forum where I think a lot of students also can join. And for that reason, I will focus throughout the presentation on leadership in governments in a way that I hope is relatable and not too technical. But if I'm getting a bit sideways and a bit too technical, don't hesitate to stop me, ask questions. And of course, we have a Q&A in the end, which I'm very much looking forward to. Should I share the presentation, or will it be shared by the host?
We will share the.
I am not able to share the presentation. All right. Should we go ahead like this?
Yes. Is it clear, the presentation?
It's clear. And every time I switch the slide, I just ask for
Yeah,
to change.
sure.
Very good. Very good. So once again, thank you for giving also an introduction to me as a person working for GGI in Indonesia. I'm the deputy country representative for the Global Green Growth Institute in Indonesia since 2019. Before, I've worked for GGI in various countries, including United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Ethiopia. I've worked closely with the Green Climate Fund that many of you may know. It's the biggest climate finance vehicle that exists under the UN. And I was liaison to that fund, and they are trying quite hard to support climate investments in Indonesia as well, and we are involved in this. I'll speak to that a bit more in a minute. All right, let's dive in. Next slide, please. Let's start with a quick overview of what we do. Let me just, in plain terms, try to explain that when I say Global Green Institute, we are not an institute that has a teaching mandate per se. We are an international, intergovernmental organization. I think something very similar that you all know is the United Nations. We are not part of the United Nations. We are standalone, but we have member countries that help us to support, especially developing countries and emerging countries, to adopt a path that we call a development path that we call green growth. Our chair is Ban Ki-moon, who you probably know as the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, and he has been, as we speak about and focus on leadership and governments, an inspirational leader to the Institute, which we are really grateful for. What we do is we try to help countries get away from a fossil fuel dependent, say brown development, economic, social, environmental development pathway, and find a healthy compromise between social, economic, and environmental issues. And beyond that, try to identify a development pathway that actually shows that green growth is not something that comes with a lot of negatives. There are actually a lot of options where the environmentally sustainable choice, the socially inclusive policy choice, is the better choice also for the economy and the economic pathway. We firmly believe in that, and our vision and mission reflects that. Our position here is quickly on the bottom right, described as trusted advisor and development partner to the government. If we go to the next slide, I will speak a bit more to that because it has interesting governance implications. GGI is not an organization that stands at the sideline as a, say, policy advocate for green growth, climate change, and other environmental related priority issues, but we are working with the government, embedded in ministries. Often we have a desk or an office within ministries in the countries you can see here. Globally, we have 43 member countries at the moment. And that gives us an advantage in being able to speak to the government and help them make informed policy choices. So a very practical example is that the government wants to work on an e-mobility policy and regulatory framework. And some of the things they're interested in is what did other countries do that was successful? What have they learned from their own policy approaches a few years ago to support the rollout of e-vehicles and charging stations and so on in the countries? And one of the typical tasks for GGI is to help them put together that analysis, that understanding, and present it to the policymakers in a way that they can relate to it and apply it to Indonesia to make good informed policy decisions. And for that, for us being embedded in the ministries, meaning we have our desks and offices in almost all ministries we work with in Indonesia and in the countries you see here, that is an advantage, of course. It makes working with the government much easier. It also means that we have to listen to what the government wants to do. We can not always very loudly shout at what we want, and our role in positively influencing these targets of the government is to provide good advice and hope to influence the government of Indonesia, for example, to be more ambitious in their climate change targets. Yeah? And we hope also to work not only with the government, but with other stakeholders, of course, communities, private sector, investors. So policies that we design can translate into actual on-the-ground projects that make the difference and have an impact. Next slide, please. Some examples of the areas we work in, you can see here. For example, in the dark boxes at the bottom of the slide, you can see solar energy. I would increase that. It's renewable energy, really, in Indonesia, because you have very interesting opportunities in Indonesia in biomass to energy, in compressed biogas, for example, and pome to energy, pome to biogas. Green hydrogen is a very interesting topic in the future for Indonesia, who has large geothermal resources, for example, large hydropower resources. So renewable energy is something we focus on in Indonesia, but of course also forests and sustainable landscapes, green buildings and greening industry, waste is a key topic, and sustainable transportation. But I've marked with red here, you can see at the bottom, gender and inclusive development, which is not something we just mainstream in our work. We really try to make it a target, a focal area of our work, where we dedicate in the projects we design and develop with the government resources and people and focus to working with communities, with people affected by the project, affected by gender aspects of the project, the inclusivity aspects of the project, to reach out to them and have them actively engaged in the project so they can voice their concerns and make their own recommendations and suggestions. That's very important for projects to later actually work and do good and not more harm than good, right? And just at the top, you see that we call it GGI value chain. It's basically the work we do in the different countries. It starts on the left with a lot of diagnosis and assessment. What is going on? What's the country context? What policy or regulatory framework do you need to improve? Do you want to look at in what sector? What are the challenges? Why are things not going as fast and improving as fast as we want to see? And once we have hopefully sound and good policies and regulations in place, we still need to take several steps. And it is from these policies and regulations to action plans. What does the government actually, and the ministries and the agencies and the governments and the provinces, what do they actually have to do on a daily basis? What do they have to work on to translate these policies into tangible projects that improve the lives of people, right? That is not just automatically because a policy or regulation is in place that automatically happens. So a roadmap, so to speak, an implementation roadmap is needed. Financing plans for these actions are very important. In the end, somebody has to invest and build these great green and climate change projects. So on the right-hand side, you can see design, financing, and implementation of that value chain. So we try to help design actual policies like a pilot for e-buses and charging stations, like as a forestry project that protects hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest, or peatlands, a project that increases energy efficiency in hundreds of thousands of buildings in Indonesia. So these are these specific projects that we work on. And of course, governance and leadership are key issues when we develop these projects. Next slide, please. We have been quite successful in our work so far. We are only 10 years old and we have 43 members already. So the topic is urgent and popular with governments. We have new countries joining us every year. And so far we have been doing quite a bit of work on raising investments. As you can see on the top left, we've reached the billions, not as much as we want to. We need to do more, of course, but it is a bit of a success for us, we think. And at the bottom right, you can, for example, see the policies and advisory outputs for policies that we have supported through research, through government consultations, facilitation of people and stakeholders talking to each other, and so on. And that translates hopefully in carbon greenhouse gas emissions reduced, in green jobs created, in income created from these green jobs for communities and families, into hectares of forest protected, and so on. That's how we eventually measure our impact, right? That is the goal of all these policies and investments, impactful benefits for the people. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, in Indonesia, for the governance aspects of our work, in Indonesia and all the other countries we work in, since we are an intergovernmental organization, we have a partner or counterpart ministry or agency in each country, which is our direct partner to work with. In Indonesia, it's Bappenas. We are here since 2013 in Indonesia as GGI. We have a so-called host country agreement, which gives us the right to operate here. So that is the basis for the governments. And on the next slide, please. On this slide, I'll give you a brief overview of what that translates to in terms of program. So Indonesia has so-called country program framework. You will see that if you look at World Bank, ADB, organizations like GGI, like the Global Green Growth Institute, we all have usually these planning frameworks or strategic frameworks over a period of often 5 years, sometimes 4 years, 3 years, which is basically a description of what we want to work on with the government. That helps us to focus, don't spread too thin, and very importantly for the government, to help coordinate all the different work between ministries and organizations like GGI. Indonesia is a pretty big country, more than 270 million people, different cultures, languages, islands. It's very important to have these well-coordinated processes in place, or otherwise governing such a country like Indonesia will be quite chaotic and difficult. And these country program frameworks, planning frameworks, they help us organize all of us, each of us, like GGI, like World Bank, to organize our work with the government of Indonesia. And what we do is, as you can see, we work at national level, here in Jakarta with the ministries, but also in 7 focal provinces, in West, East, North, South, and Central Kalimantan, as well as in Papua and West Papua. That's very important to get impact at provincial level and people in the provinces feeling positive impact. We must closely engage with the communities there and with the governments there. They have a lot of knowledge. The local knowledge is key to make informed decisions for the ministries here in Jakarta as well. And this is one of GGI's role to make sure that that knowledge and these insights and comments are exchanged. And we're doing that looking at renewable energy, green cities, sustainable landscapes, and focus a lot on green finance and investments as thematic areas. Our main activities here are, as I said, policy development and planning support, but also mobilizing investments in climate change and green projects, as well as a lot of capacity building, because there is still a lot of work to do in improving the knowledge of green and climate change policies. Next slide. Of course, we don't do that on our own. We do that with a group of partners. This is just the snapshot of the partners from government we work with. We work with also, of course, with a lot of what we call stakeholders or partners outside of government. For Indonesia, that's quite interesting, I think, in terms of government. We are working under a green growth program that is led and owned entirely by the government of Indonesia. We are supporting the projects that are implemented here, completely aligned with what the government targets. For example, the national determined contribution. As you know, these are the climate change goals that Indonesia has committed to. So we are aligned to that and work under that umbrella. We call that the Green Growth Program. It's headed by Bappenas, and you can see it's quite a few ministries and agencies involved. Ministry of Environment and Forestry has a major role here. Now I work on forestry. We work with CADEN, the Chamber of Commerce, on initiatives to help companies to go green, and most lately to try to help achieve net zero commitments by the government of Indonesia. So there's a lot of policy and regulatory work to be done, and a lot of investments by companies to be made to actually achieve, climate change mitigation and adaptation effects at scale, big enough for the country and the people to feel. Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, of course, for our work in renewable energy, but you can see also on the left, we are working with the National Public Administration and the agency a lot on capacity building, hoping that through green growth, capacity building and learning modules that we help develop, that public sector employees will be able to access latest knowledge on green growth policies and investment regulation, to improve that capacity within the ministries for green growth. And at the bottom, you see, of course, the Ministry of Finance to attract investments. Next slide, please.
You have 3 minutes left, Norbert. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So investment is a key part of our work, and that's where I think we usually stop. Very important too, where we stop our work as GGI. We are non-profit, and this is where we hand over the projects we support to hopefully private sector investors, because they are mature, they are ready. These are green growth projects, say investments in two-wheeler, electric two-wheeler swapping stations and so on, that can be now financed by others and taken up to put electric two-wheelers on the roads in Jakarta to improve the air, reduce emissions, and so on. So we go that way through supporting financial instruments. The projects, they're designed themselves. National financing vehicles are very important. And we go to the next slide. Next slide, please. I will jump over that next slide, please. Right, and let me just finish with 2 more slides, and that leads, hopefully, that investment work leads to these examples of projects. Here is an example from the forestry sector. Or they are quite different in nature. Some focus on sustainable coconut and palm sugar production. Smaller projects where we really go to the level of how to produce actually that coconut and palm sugar together with the project developer. Others are more technical in nature, where we try to help the provincial governments improve the policies and regulatory frameworks, for example, to protect peatlands and forests and mangroves. These projects sometimes are quite big. They have to be big because Indonesia is very big. There are tens and hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest that need to be protected for Indonesia to stay on track of their climate change goals. And that is one of our targets and mandates as GGI in Indonesia, to help the government achieve that. And then the next slide. One more slide I do have as an example, our work with the Green Climate Fund. Again, very important. the Green Climate Fund, as the biggest climate investor, non-private climate investor in the world, must have a leadership role in driving and supporting countries in their investments for climate change. Of course, that leadership role means that they offer very significant financing, but it also means that they have to respect the governance in the country and the leadership that comes from communities and from provinces and, of course, the national government in Jakarta, and how they want to see this money spent. And you can see here a few examples of projects we are at the moment working on, such as a green peatland economy, renewable energy power plants, adaptation projects that help, micro-sized projects, very community-based climate change adaptation projects. To finance them, adaptation finance is always difficult. So you can see these are very different, some of the projects are very different in nature, and I'll just close now with the comment that we always make sure that there is environmental and social impact assessments. We do not support projects that are weak on those. We don't support projects that pose risks to communities in these regards. And it's actually, in my personal opinion and the opinion of my colleagues, it's actually helping projects a lot if they get communities involved from the beginning, because they have the insights on what's happening on the ground. And just having the finance in place and a high-level view and ambition on what needs to get done is often not enough to really successfully implement, these project examples that you can see here, for example, renewable energy plants. So to me, community engagement, the right governance approach is actually a must. It's to remove a key risk from project success for green growth and climate change projects. I will end here, and I'm looking forward to the other presentations and your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Norbert, for the insightful material. Indeed, it is very important to understand how environmental policies are being implemented and how other stakeholders outside the government body work together with the government to create good environmental governance. And I believe that the participants here have a lot of questions in their head. You can type down your question in the chat box so we can deliver it later after the speakers deliver the materials. All right. Thank you very much. And let's move to the second speaker, Ms. Livita. We'll discuss about the blue economy and how its application as environmental policy. I will invite Ms. Livita. Good afternoon, Ms. Livita.
Hi again, good afternoon. Am I audible? I think I can.
Yeah, it's very clear.
Oh, okay. It's a bit echoing on my side.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about the blue economy. I hope we can gain so much information about what is blue economy and how important it is to implement and adapt it in our country. The time is yours. You have 20 minutes for the presentation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is not my presentation. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I think I still hear the echo from my side. Can somebody help me with that? Hello? Yes. Still, yeah, I can go ahead anyway. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So please kindly introduce myself. I'm Livita from the Archipelagic and Landscape Forum Secretariat. It's a project under UNDP Indonesia, United Nations Development Program, in collaboration with the Government of Indonesia, Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment. So I'm going to be discussing and explaining about Blue Economy Initiative as one of the practical example on how the Archipelagic and Island State Forum conduct and support the policy advocacy on the blue economy. So maybe we would like to shift a bit from GGI that focus on the green economy. We will discuss more comprehensively on how it is very important for us as well to acknowledge the blue economy and how we can support the blue economy in Indonesia. Next slide, please. A bit introduction on the Archipelagic and Island State Forum. So actually it is a forum and a platform designed to include all 47 and archipelagic and island state countries around the world and identify the work together towards actionable and collaborative actions, partnership, and addressing common challenges. We actually focus on the ocean-related issues, but we divide our focus of collaboration into 4. First, climate change mitigation and adaptations. Second, blue economy that I'll be discussing a lot today. Third, marine plastic debris. And last but not least is good maritime governance. I'll touch upon the good maritime governance as well and how it is important to connect the good maritime governance with the work of the blue economy, especially in Indonesia and all over archipelagic countries around the world. Next slide, please. Before I dig into the definition of blue economy, I would like to also explain some of the programs that has been going on from the Archipelagic and Island State Forum. Because we focus on the 4 thematic area that I explained previously, we also divide it into 3 main programs. The first of all is the entrepreneurship. Second of all is the research and development, which we focus on the policy advocacy in that regard. And the third of all is about the partnership and international collaborations. And the Blue Economy program lies under research and development as well as the international partnership and collaborations. Before we move into the program on the blue economy, because I believe that the definition of blue economy is not yet popular compared to the green economy. So it is important for us all to understand what is the definition of the blue economy. It's actually a model development that tries to merge the management of holistic and sustainable manners of the ocean economy to provide long-term economic benefit and as well as social benefit without compromising the ecological integrity of the planet. Actually, the main definitions of the green or even blue economy is quite similar. How we support the economic development without compromising the sustainable component out of it, whether it is on the land, which is green economy, or whether it is on the ocean, which is blue economy. So it's quite similar, but the focus area is more into ocean and marine development. So we support on the local community, focus on the coastal area, for example, focus on the fishermen, on how they can utilize the marine ecosystem without compromising like the sustainability point of the economic development. The blue economy itself requires ocean governance, good ocean governance at the international levels to adopt the principle of the blue economy, such as sustainability, inclusivity, and science-based decision-making. This science-based decision-making is something very important for us, which we really advocate in Archipelagic and Island State Forum that I will explain later on how we achieve or still on the process of achieving science-based decision-making by implementing some of our programs. Next slide, please. Yes, one of the main example of how the science-based and informed-based decision-making to be implemented in our program. One of the most example is the Blue Economic Development Index. It's actually a tool offering open access data on the blue economy and relevant data for ICE countries. So actually the Blue Economic Development Index objective is to be used as a tracking tools to determine the current coastal and marine resources circumstances and development of scientifically informed policy framework. So for example, we conduct the analysis of the economic conditions and marine condition in one of the country in Pacific Island. So we comprehensively conduct the research on how they are currently the states that currently at the moment. So we use that scientific data to inform the government of the Fiji in this case, for example, to make sure that they got informed policy making. They got informed specific policy, and finally create an informed and science-based policy-making process in the future using this Blue Economic Development Index. So we compile and analyze all data from most of the countries, island countries and archipelagic around the world, and put it in the website, the Blue Economic Development Index of ICE Forum, so where country can track annually what kind of development or what kind of challenges that they are currently faced at the moment, and what is the opportunity can be done, for example, intergovernmentally to make sure that they can create or propose a better policy making in terms of the ocean governance process. So the Blue Economic Development Index also used a system of evaluations that incorporated in central algorithm as the basis of analyzing, using 4 main indicators. First of all, the ocean capital. Second of all, enabling factors. Third of all, social capital, as well as the sustainable growth. So at the moment, the 3 main components evaluates the economic, social, environment feature on the national blue economy. So it is very important because this is the first index in the world that analyze this economic, social, environmental impact, especially on the ocean basis. That's why during the intergovernmental meetings that usually conducted by countries or usually organized by the Archipelagic Analysis Forum, we analyze this kind of the results of the data, the result of the analysis, and we also discuss on the possible collaborative actions that should be conducted by the countries, either it is regionally or even globally, to make sure that we can have a better policy making process within the country. Into next slide, please. Second of all, after conducting the Blue Economic Development Index, we also have a program called the Innovative Financings, because we believe that, for example, like Indonesia, we have almost 70% of the size of the country consists of the oceans. That's why it is very important to have a sustainable and sufficient financing to make sure that we can manage our oceans well. That's why, because we believe at the moment we still have a gap on financing the marine resources and creating a good maritime governance within our country, and most in the Archipelagic Analysis Forum around the world. That's why we come up with the initiative of the innovative financing. So it is actually because we believe it is the future of sustainable global economy, and that's why there is still considerably gap between the funding and the necessary funding required to achieve sustainable development goals, especially on the oceans. That's why we conduct the innovative financing to develop a strategic framework, disseminate the informations, as well as involve public in the open dialogue to select relevant projects that should be funded or should be focused on by the government of the archipelagic and land state countries. Next slide, please. Coming to example of the innovative financing, we have 2 main programs that focus on the innovative financing. First of all is the Blue Economic Strategic. Second of all, the Coral Insurance Framework. The Blue Economic Strategic, we conducted and organized this framework in collaboration closely with the government of Indonesia, including the Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Fisheries Affairs, to create and write a blue financing strategic document that can act as a guide for investment in the blue economy by measuring the project impact based on environmental, economic, and social factors. So the basis is still those 3: environment, economic, and social factor. We cannot leave one of the factor behind. We have to ensure that those 3 factors can be hand in hand, run together in order to make sure a good economic strategy in our country, especially on the marine governance matters. So we have, as the result of the Blue Economic Strategy, we're currently still discussing with our participating countries on how to implement the Blue Economic Strategy within their countries. But one of the practical example that has been resulted by this Blue Economic Strategy is that ICE Forum is currently developing the Blue Bonds and Blue Sukuk framework, which guide the archipelagic island state in ensuring the debt and make sure that they can choose the most sustainable project that related to the marine science and related related to the oceans and related to the marine resources. And second of all, the practical example of the innovative financing that we are currently developing is coral insurance framework. We explore the sustainable risk management solutions for coral needs and for the communities depends on the resources. Because this is the first UNDP project on the coral insurance framework, and we want to make sure that we can preserve our ocean with sustainable financing mechanism. We are working with the risk insurance facility in UNDP Geneva, work together with them to make sure that we can have the best financing mechanism and the best insurance mechanism to preserve our ocean in Indonesia. This is also, we work together with the OJK and the Minister of Finance in regards to this, and we want to make sure that those government ministry in Indonesia and also the in the other archipelagic and landscape forum have an awareness and have a informed decisions on creating the coral the insurance framework, and for example focus on the corals framework. Next please. Yes, and this is my last slide. So besides working with the government of Indonesia and the government of Archipelagic and Land State Forum in regards of the policy making process, we also believe that it is very important to engage with public with regards to the policy making process and to make sure to involve public audience, wider audience, including researchers, students, university, think tank institution, in order to make a better and more informative as well as innovative policy framework. That's why in Archipelagic and Land State Forum, we also have a program called Joint Research Grants. So it's actually annually program where we provide a joint research that and we allow the participations from the university, think tank, student, lecturer, or even general public audience in collaboration with another archipelagic and state around the world to submit a research paper idea for us, for example, in thematic area of the blue economy or even good maritime governance. And at the end of the day, we can have we can provide a research grant to this institution, and they can do the research for example some period of the research, for example 6 months or even a year. And at the end of the day, we would like to know the final finding of the research. It could be like the policy suggestion or policy brief. It could be or even anything that related to the policy, good maritime governance, or even blue economy. We open all the opportunity and all the topic in regards to that. And at the end of the day, the result of the joint results can be presented during the senior official meeting and ministerial meeting of Archipelagic and Land State Forum annually, and it can be informed to the government of Archipelagic and Land State Forum, the current condition and current innovative suggestion of the research presented by researcher. And we can also discuss how to implement the research possibly in every Archipelagic and Land State Forum. So I think this is very important and very interesting opportunity for everyone in here, especially for the students and researcher, which I believe most of the participants today from Universitas Gadjah Mada, to make sure that you you follow us and make sure that you can get information on the next joint research program in 2023 that's usually conducted in April or even May in 2023. So yes, I think that's all from my side. Next slide, please. I believe it's end of the slide. Yes. Please feel free to contact me if you if you have any questions or if you have anything in mind that relates to the blue economy or even policy on the good maritime governance, we are very open to collaborate, and we are very open to engage with our possible partner, especially from the research institutions, university, and think tank, to make sure that we can engage together the community to make sure that we can have a better policy making process within within in Indonesia, but not only in Indonesia, but also in the whole archipelagic and state around the world. Thank you very much, and look forward for the question and answer and discussion later on.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Livita. Now we know why archipelagic states like Indonesia need to adopt blue economy, right? And the scope of the blue economy itself is not only put focus only in economic development and sustainability, but also in the social aspect. And yeah, that is very, very important. And we will have our further discussion after our third speaker join us. I would like to welcome Miss Eva Bakhtiar, our third speaker today, who will show us the best example of what we can do for our environment, while also encourage economic development through sustainable business practice. Hello, Miss Eva.
Hi, Bu Audrey.
Okay. I think we can start now. The time is yours.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor for me to be able to meet you all virtually. Thank you, Bu Odori. Greetings to Mr. Mas and Miss Lipita. I think I learned so much from your presentation. My name is Eva. I'm co-founder and CEO of Garda Pangan. And today I'm going to share about what we have been doing in Garda Pangan as a social enterprise working on environmental issue at the grassroots level, which is about food loss and food waste issue. Okay, next. All right, so in Indonesia, food loss and waste is a serious problem, but it's not as much discussed and addressed as other issues such as plastic waste, for example. And maybe not many of us are even aware that Indonesia is actually, here it is the third, but I think from the latest data in 2022, we are now the second biggest food loss and waste producer among G20 countries, squandering 115 until 184 kilograms of food loss and waste per capita per year. And before we move on, I think I'd like to clarify for those who probably are not familiar with the terms, food loss occurs before it reaches a consumer as a result of issues in the production, storage, processing, and distribution phases, while food waste refers to the food that is discarded at the retail or consumption phases. Next. All right, so this is the composition of waste in Indonesia. So it's not plastic, it is actually food waste that has the biggest composition in Indonesia. Next. All right, food loss and waste also have, tremendous negative impacts in many sectors. In economic sector, for example, it generates 213 until 551 billion per year economic loss, or equal to 4 until 5% of Indonesia's GDP. Next. And then in terms of its serious environmental impact, our food loss and waste generates a lot of greenhouse gases, contributing to 7 until 8% of emissions that exacerbates the climate crisis, of course. And even in 2005, maybe some of you remember, concentrated methane from organic waste even triggered a catastrophic explosion in Lewi Gajah dumping site in West Java, burying a village with 143 fatalities. But next slide. But what hits me the most is that, food waste and food loss is also an irony, as on the other side, 19.4 million of people in Indonesia still struggle for food every day. Millions of Indonesian people suffer from malnutrition and stunting. So it's not a good look. Next. Yeah, so what came to my mind was very simple. Why don't we bridge the gap between those with food surplus and those who need them the most? So why beneath if we can feed people in needs? And that's when we come up with Garda Pangan, which is a social enterprise with two main goals, food loss and waste eradications, but also at the same time, hunger relief. Next. The way we work is following a very simple guidance. It's called food recovery hierarchy. It shows us the order of priority on how to best sustainably consume our food and keeping it from ending up in our landfills. So as you can see here, the most favorable action is surely to reduce food waste. But then should you have any left over, then the next priority is to donate the edible food to the people. And then you can also share it to your family, neighbors. And once the food is no more edible, the next priority is to use it for animal feeds, industrial uses, and lastly, to compost bin. So incineration or landfill is the place that we avoid the most. Next. So here's a glimpse of what our organization looks like. It is quite unique. As one side, we work as a food bank whose main purpose is to serve the people while reducing food loss and waste. Next, but in order to have sustainable and independent funding to run the food bank, we have a couple of business units still related to food loss and waste issues. But all the profits generated would be used to, again, to provide the operational funding. Next. All right, so this is some example of our programs. This is what we call food rescue. That literally means rescuing surplus food so that they don't end up as waste. So what we do is basically cycling the food waste. Previous slide, please. So what we do is basically tackling the food waste from its biggest source, which is hospitality industries and food businesses. So the way we work is by having a partnership with restaurants, hotels, cafes, bakeries, retailers, and so on. Unfortunately, food waste is still considered as necessary evil in this sector, meaning that reducing food waste is considered, as inevitable process. And that's why generally wasting food is considered as the easiest, it's the cheapest and fastest option. While actually they are still safe, wholesome, edible food. Next. All right, so not only picking up the food from businesses, we also rescue the food from the big events like weddings, conference, festivals, any parties and celebrations, you name it, that used to involve huge amount of food. So in this case, we also have a partnership with wedding organizers and caterer providers. So basically people can request us to pick up the surplus food from their events. Next. Another source of food loss is from the farmer's field. So what we do is something called gleaning, which is gathering leftover fruits and vegetables from the farmer's field. We call it gleaning, but it is basically the same as other food rescue, only we're rescuing them directly on the farmer's field. So this usually happens on peak harvest season where commodity prices plunge significantly that even the selling price would not cover the harvesting costs. So farmers tend to choose to leave the produce rotting on the field without harvesting them. So in this picture, for instance, is when we were gleaning the cabbage in Jember, East Java, because the price plunged from 3,000 per kilograms to only 150 rupiah per kilograms. So farmers chose to not harvest the cabbage, leaving it rotten in the field. So that's what we pick up as well. Next. And of course, in addition to rescuing The food and produce, we realize that it's also very important to spread the awareness about food waste issue and sustainable consumption. So we actively roll out creative campaign, either offline and online. Next. We also provide a sustainable and responsible food waste management service, mostly for big scale companies that, that previously they used to hire a vendor to destroy a huge amount of food near expired foods. So what we do is basically offering them a new approach that instead of destroying food, we can make the most out of the food, distributing them safely to people in needs in timely manner. Next. We also provide food waste workshops, educations, and consultancy service to schools, offices, communities, companies, and so on. Next. And then this is another, our next business line, which is the ugly produce business, because we would like to encourage people to rethink about what they consume. So next. Here's what we call ugly. Ugly, quote unquote, produce that is wrinkled, maybe they're undersized, oddly shaped, maybe slightly blemished. And these types of produce are not appealing and they are usually end up as waste, while we believe that they are as tasty, helpful, and nutritious. Next. Next. All right, so we work with a lot of farmers and distributors to give their ugly produce a second chance. We also process their unsold ugly produce into a lot of various healthy snacks like cold pressed juice, dried fruits, jams, ice cream, kimchi, and so on. Next. And then we also have an organic waste treatment by black soldier fly. So we offer a lot of food businesses actually two kinds of service. So for their edible food surpluses, we donate it to the people in needs. But then for their organic scrap, we also provide the service to treat the organic waste by, we call it BASF or black shoulder fly, and we turn them into the animal feeds. Next. All right. Policy advocacy. The big challenge for Garda Pangan is the absence of supporting rules and regulations. So as for now, Indonesia actually does not have clear policies about food loss and waste reduction. While a lot of best practices in other countries actually has shown that existence of clear supporting policies would enhance the donation rate and then the food loss and waste reductions in the national level. So for example, US and Argentina, they have clear liability protection for donors and food recovery organizations. UK has policy that permits businesses or individuals to donate the food that passed best before date. French, I think one of the best, they ban the retailers and supermarket to discard their edible food and require them to donate their surplus food to food banks and local charities. South Korea also has a pay-as-you-throw policies. So the citizen has to pay the amount of money in accordance to the number of height of the food waste that they produce. So in Indonesia, we are currently advocating our government for such legislations. That is why since the very beginning, Garda Pangan actively participate in, in advocating or helping the government to publish supporting policies. Next, last month on World Food Day, I published a policy brief about comprehensive regulations of food loss and waste reductions that should be prioritized and implemented in Indonesia. It was sent to the House of Representatives, President Staff, Task Force, and so on. And hopefully something good will come out of it. I know that policy making, it has a long way to go. And in the meantime, we have to do our best with what we have in hands. Next. So we currently have 155 locations of direct beneficiaries locations all over Surabaya. Each one of them has been carefully assessed and surveyed, and it's selected based on our target criteria, such as poor families, disabled, homeless, elderly persons, shelter, foster care, transgender, and so on. Next. Here is our quantitative impact. Since our initial operations in 2017, we have rescued 400,000 portions of food, equal with 110 tons of potential food loss and waste. And we distribute them to 26,000 beneficiaries and still counting. Next. 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 I think that's all from me. This is the some of the SDGs that we're trying to to help. Next. All right, I think that's all from me, and I hope that we can discuss further in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Miss Eva, for your time. And I think we can agree here that food waste management should have a proper policy supported by the government and all the stakeholders. And we can see from the practice that you brought today in the table that it works. The food waste management works and it helps a lot of people, and it also helps to maintain our environmental in a good shape, in a good government. So I think we can move to the discussion session. Let's see, we are having like several questions. The operators, can you please share the screen? Okay, so we have question for Green Growth Institute, UNDP, and also Garda Pangan here. So from Nobert, yeah, I think there is question about the challenge or obstacles that your organization oftentimes face during the implementation and collaboration with the government body. And also for the second question, it about who receive the fund and implements the program. How do you conduct the green impact assessment, and are the results openly accessible for everyone? This question is from Talisa, student from University of Melbourne. And still for Nobert, the question is from our student Andika from IUP PPM. In my opinion, a vital movement to push further the agendas of sustainable transportation, especially in urban areas, is to transform the paradigm of private automobile usage in public transportation usage. And the question is, have there any instances or example of your organization helping government entities develop any policies to prioritize public transportation and push away car-centric policies in the past? All right, and okay, there is a question also for Miss Livita. Where is the position of international organization or international NGOs like UNDP in the implementation of blue economy in Indonesia? So I think the question is all about the implementation of blue economy in Indonesia and the challenges. The second question is about the challenges of the implementation, and also the third question is, how does UNDP and ICE Forum cooperate with the local community to achieve the blue economy in Indonesia? And last but not least, for Ms. Eva, is there any support from the government body or other stakeholders If yes, what kind of support do they usually offer? And how does Garda Pangan advocate the food waste issue to be priority of Indonesia government in public policy? All right, I think, yeah, that's all. Maybe we can start first from Norbert. Hi, Norbert.
Hello.
Hi again. Okay, I think you have like 5 until 7 minutes to answer the question. If there may be any follow-up question, we can discuss it later.
Thank you. Looking at the first question, I'm happy to say that it is usually quite easy to cooperate with others. I have found, not only in Indonesia, but in other countries I work with, that inside and outside of government, people are really open to hear how we can improve for our work for sustainable development and green growth. We usually don't find it difficult at all to secure meetings, for example, with governments, as long as the request is directed at the right people. So that is the only limitation that perhaps that comes here. Of course, you need to find the right people in a government like Indonesia and the public sector with more than 4.7 million public sector employees. That's not always easy. We usually have us to help us sort out who we talk to and others. But generally, that is really a positive experience on my side. There are no larger obstacles. If I just look at the question per se, there are no larger obstacles for that cooperation. If we have the resources, the funding, if we have an overlap of goals and mandate, so what we are allowed to work on, then usually people are very happy to reach out and suggest ideas to partner and be more effective and efficient in our work. On the second question that perhaps you could bring back, I think that is a question, who receives the funds? There are two different ways of the funds being dispersed. One is directly going to GGI to do our work with the governments. The other one is when we help mobilize investments in green growth and climate change projects. And that funding then goes from an investor and financier to whoever the recipient is. Sometimes these are NGOs, sometimes these are private sector companies, sometimes these are communities or the government. That depends on the exact project that is being supported. The amount of investment into actual tangible projects, like green infrastructure projects, is much, much bigger than the funding we receive. So that is always a goal of us. For every dollar we receive, GGI, for our work, we try to have a factor of 15 to mobilize financing and investment that goes into actual tangible projects to make sure we are effective, in our work. Green impact assessment, it's usually done in a way that, so it depends on what we work on. I have been involved because it was policy stage at something we call extended cost benefit analysis. For example, that's a methodology. It's not the only one, but you can use that. And one interesting aspect of that is that you try to look also at the benefits of for the health of people, for example, from reduced emissions from cars, and you try to monetize that because there is a money value to people getting less sick, and that helps sometimes governments make investment decisions and see the true value of a better policy. And we do these assessments by talking to people, collecting data, trying to figure out the right way to calculate a methodology, always in a group of people, right? This needs to be later taken up by the government who makes a decision. If they are not involved from the beginning, usually they find it difficult at a later stage than to just pick it up. So it is important to have, in our role as an intergovernmental organization, to have the government and others on board from the beginning, including communities. And on the third question, being aware of the time left, excellent point on the sustainable transportation, because I used a lot e-mobility as the buzzword, and I used perhaps some examples that cater towards individual transportation, but what we really want to do is to combine e-mobility with public transportation. And most of our projects are actually catering towards public transportation, such as e-buses. And we hope we can start working next year, quite soon actually, on a larger pilot for electric buses in Indonesia. We have this year supported Rwanda in simply dedicating a zone in one of their cities, one of the bigger cities they have, for walkway, getting rid of cars. They haven't done it before. That's, of course, they want to first do it with a pilot, a small located project to gain experience, to see if people like it. You know, what economic effect does it have on that community if cars suddenly cannot go through that area anymore? So we look at the different modes of transportations that we say: walking, cars, of course, trains, cable cars, you know, all the kind of thing that can be used to combine different sustainable ways of transportation. Put simply, anything that gets us away from combustion-based transportation. And yes, just as a note, and some of you might think it's important where the energy for the e-mobility comes from. Absolutely, it has to be renewable energy. That always goes hand in hand. Just having e-cars or e-buses, if the electricity comes from dirty sources, doesn't help really. It just relocates the source of emission, so to speak, from the car to the power plant. I have given a bit of an example on Rwanda. Another one is a BRT in Amman that we supported for years. A very nice project, I thought, where you combine e-buses with a bus rapid transportation system. Amman is the capital city of Jordan. They didn't have e-buses in their mind when they designed the transportation system, and we convinced them to look at e-buses as an option. So that's a nice pilot that we supported, including the policy and regulations that need to be in place for the government to actually invest in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Norbert, for the answer to our discussion session. I think we can move to the next question for Miss Livita. Okay, here we have the position of UNDP as international organization or international NGOs in the implementation of blue economy in Indonesia, and what kind of challenges to develop or to implement the blue economy in Indonesia. You have 5 until 7 minutes to answer the question.
Yes, thank you much for the excellent questions and participations for the question and answer sessions. First, I would like to answer the questions with regards to the UNDP position as well as the other international organization position on the economy in Indonesia. In general, UNDP has a very strong presence in the among the other international organizations on the blue economy. World Bank has a strong presence as well, but we focus on the advocacy and advocacy on the blue financing, including, as I mentioned before, supporting the government in Indonesia to launch Blue Sukuk and Blue Bond. For example, the Archipelagic and Asset Forum, UNDP, Indonesia has helped the government of Indonesia to launch the Blue Bond in the United Nations Ocean Conference last June in Lisbon, Portugal. So now I believe the positions of UNDP Indonesia and other international organizations as well as international NGO is more into the operationalizations of the blue economy. So after conducting the policy advocacy on how we should create the more informed blue policy, including finally to create Blue Sukuk and Blue Bond, for example. So it's more into the operationalization of it to make sure that this project doesn't stop only in here, but also to make sure that, for example, the private sector or even the community can together to support this project and make sure that the implementation of the project can be successful. And can provide a greater benefit to the community, especially in the coastal area in Indonesia. Second of all, questions on the challenge. So I think it's still relevant on the operationalizations of the policy making process or policy result. So I believe the challenge at the moment is more into prioritizing the blue agenda into the government table. Before, the notions of the blue economy or the blue agenda has been there since the very beginning of the year, even though it's not that early compared to the green economy in Indonesia, but it's more into the presence of the blue economy or the notions of the blue economy is not deep on the table of the government Indonesia. That's what exactly that we want to embed the importance of blue in marine sector, especially operationalizations and especially in creating more effective and sustainable marine resources has to be embedded deeply during the policymaking process. So it's already there now, but more into how the government institution or even government departments has aware about this and make sure that embed this agenda into their daily program and into their relevant program into the community. In relevant to the questions number 3 on how we work together with the local community, I can provide examples on how we work together with the local community in Manado, local fishermen in Manado. We work together in collaboration with the Samratulangi University, the local university based on North Sulawesi, and James Cook University in Singapore as the result of our joint research program. So we conducted a project where we tag the fish that caught by the fishermen, and we want to make sure we want to see the data of the fish in the ocean. So after we tag the fish and we release again the fish into the ocean, so we capture the data. So which kind of fish that usually in those area, which kind of fish usually in those area, what kind of area that the fishermen should not go, for example, in order to make sure they caught a lot of fish in the ocean. So that kind of project that we usually do with the local community in Indonesia. The latest example is in Manado. So we provide informations, science-based information to the fishermen to make sure they can have most effective time on the sea and caught a lot of fish to have a better economic conditions in their community. So I think that's all my answer. Thank you very much for the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Livita, for answering the question. Let's move to the third session for Ms. Eva Bakhtiar. I think there is also one more question by Fajar Pramudia. Okay. The support from any government body or other stakeholders, and how Garda Pangan advocate the food waste issue to be priority of Indonesia government in public policy. And also the last question, how we can do as young people in other areas to contribute to this movement, and your hope for further policy that can be adopted by our government. Okay, the time is yours. You have 5 until 7 minutes.
Okay. So for the first question, is there any support from the government? As for now, I can say that there's very little support from the government. I do hope that they can do more. The local government in Surabaya, for example, they said that they're glad of our existence, but then that's it. No real support or infrastructure support or anything else. So in terms of funding, as a social enterprise, we get our operation funding 40% from the donation and then 60% from our independent business line. So no support from government as well. But we are currently proposing to work with the municipal government in Surabaya to give their idle land and building for us to change it into an organic waste treatment plant. So let's hope it works. And then the second question, how does Garda Pangan advocate the food waste issue? Yeah, so it is actually a very long journey. At the beginning of Garda Pangan, we have countless meetings with municipal governments, provincial governments, but seems like it didn't go anywhere. And then last year, I think one of the party in Indonesia, they proposed a bill in House of Representatives, but it's a bill about food bank. And we learned the draft and found there are a lot of, policy gaps. It should have been so much better, I believe. So we provide the recommendation for them to change the draft. And actually to change the bill. The bill should not be about the food bank. The bill should be about the food loss and waste reduction effort. But then I guess the draft doesn't pass the prolegnas or program legislation national. So I think it will be stuck for a while. I don't know until when. And then we also have a lot of meetings with presidential staff. So because it is very hard to push it as a bill, so we try to make it in another way as PP or peraturan pemerintah or peraturan presiden or presidential policies. So we try to push it that way, but it's still in progress. And we also have a lot of coordination with Bappenas and other environmental NGO like WRI, World Resource Institute, and so on. So yeah, basically we try from a lot of directions, and let's hope we can make it real someday. And then what can we do as a youth? Yeah, I guess food loss and waste is a very complicated issue. It happens in a lot of stages from the production, transportations, retail, consumptions, and so on. So what we can do is at least try it from our circle, from our household, from ourselves, and then try to do it bigger and bigger. And then what kind of the policies that we try to push? There are a lot of policies, but we prioritize these surplus food donations for now. So that's the very first priority in my opinion, because at least when we save the food surplus, when we rescue the food surplus, we can also feed a lot of people. So considering the benefits, we would pursue that kind of policy first. And then we'll go to the food labeling standard in Indonesia, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions in expiration date, best before date in Indonesia. There are a lot of confusion. Some of the, some of the regulations in BPOM and regulations in other regulations sometimes conflicting. So that creates the confusions in the consumers, and that drives to a bigger food waste. So that's the priority number 2. And then priority number 3 is creating, our own policies, but research-based policies. I think we can take some examples from other countries, but it should be emerged from our own research and based on our necessities and based on the characteristic of Indonesian people, because we cannot just copy one policies that works effectively in other countries and apply it in our countries. It has to be based on research. So that's all. I hope it answers your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Eva, for answering the question. And I think finally we arrived to the end of our session. The time is still ticking. Thank you very much for all of the speakers. We have discussed about the challenge, about the lack of formal policy and collaboration between the government and the non-government sectors, the strategy and support, and how the governments should put the environmental policy into a daily policy program. So before I give the forum back to the master of ceremony, there is some conclusion that we can conclude here. So as a part of innovation policy to achieve sustainable economic development through environmental policy, it is essential to include the discussion on how non-formal actors such as community-based organization, NGO, and as well as international organization to develop environmental initiative and take responsibility for sustainable growth. In the policy will not start into implementation without good leadership action. We are the agent and we are the stakeholder, we are the leader to support the environmental policy adoption and implementation in our country. And public policy intervention should be guided by the simple idea that we ought to use various policy approaches that offer the greatest promise of working to resolve the environmental problems at hand. Once again, I would like to thank all of the speakers, Mr. Norbert, Ms. Livita, and also Ms. Eva for the insightful materials and great discussion. We are very happy to have you all here. And I think that's all. I will give the forum back to Dimas as Master of Ceremony. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for moderating this event so well, Miss Ori. I also would like to thank all of our amazing speakers today who are very insightful and provide a new perspective, not only for the government in producing mature policies to support a sustainable economic development, but also provide an overview of how different actors such as non-governmental organizations and grassroots civil society organizations govern itself to create an impact in environmental policy initiatives, especially in the current landscape of the ongoing climate crisis. This lesson will undoubtedly be useful for everyone here to remain aware of the importance of sustainability and our obligation to become an agent of change in defending our home from an irreversible destruction. Once again, a friendly reminder for all of the participants, please fill out the attendance and evaluation form as soon as possible if you have not already done so. The link has been shared by the committee in the chat room for you to access. I repeat, to please fill out the attendance and evaluation form as soon as possible if you have not already done so. A certificate will only be distributed to the participants who have filled the attendance and evaluation form. The certificate will be emailed to all participants within 5 working days. As an appreciation for all of our amazing speakers today, we are currently moving to the certificate awarding session. Thus, I would like to invite all of our speakers to get ready for the certificate awarding ceremony. I would call upon the speaker one by one, and afterwards, each one of our speakers would take a photo with the certificate. Okay, first, I would invite Mr. Norbert Mas. We thank you for your insightful presentation in today's event. And I kindly request the technical team to help us take the picture. Okay, I will count from 1 to 3, Mr. Norbert. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Norbert. I now will invite Ms. Livita Sumali. We thank you for the new perspectives you brought into our discussion today. I will now kindly request the technical team to help us. I will count from 1 to 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Ms. Livita. Last but not least, I now kindly invite Ms. Eva Bahtiar. We thank you for the inspiring presentation today. Okay, I will count from 1 to 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Eva. Now, before we wrap up today's event, I would like to invite all of you to take a picture together. All participants, kindly turn on your camera for the photos. And yeah, I would once again invite the technical team to help us with the photo. Once again, for all the participants, I kindly request you to turn on your camera. And I will then count from 1 to 3. Okay, shall we start from this first slide? 1, 2, 3. Okay, going to the next slide. 1, 2, 3. And to the last slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Finally, thank you for your kind attention to our discussion today. And we really hope that it is a fruitful discussion for all of us to participate in and oversee the development of public policy-related sustainability initiatives. Everyone, the Department of Public Policy and Management has a vision to become an internationally recognized educational and research institution in the field of public policy and management as a manifestation of a research university and good university governance by 2032. So, there will be many more interesting events and programs like this awaiting to be held in the near future. On behalf of the Working Committee, I am Dimas Denando. Thank you very much and see you all at the next event.